Very warm welcome to the third session in the European strand of this amazing event, Type Around the Clock. It's a pleasure to have you all join us. I've been looking forward to this. It's a topic that I particularly love, and so I'm really looking forward to heading into it. Get your mind into sibling mode so that you can just share your thoughts as we go through. Any questions, please put in the chat or raise your hand and ask them. We don't mind in whatever direction this will go. We will also be having a little bit of an after party. So if we don't have a long enough break time for you to say what you want to say, then we will be continuing on afterwards so that we can have a chat and answer any of your questions, so that there will be some time at the end. But for now, let me just share my screen and get the slides going for you. There we go. So everybody okay with those? Thumbs up? Yeah, we're all good. So a warm welcome to the sibling factor. And this topic has fascinated me for a very long time. I'm really looking forward to your input and hearing about your experiences. I think generally we have been looking a lot at how parents influence us, how that works out, but really the sibling relationship and how the dynamics are between the siblings is extremely important as well. I think it influences our lives both when we're children and also as we grow up. So for those of you who don't know me, obviously my name is Sue Blair. I've been working with Type for over 25 years, and I've loved almost every minute of it. I have to say that there are times when you find out things about yourself that can be true, but also a little bit uncomfortable. So there are moments in life where learning about Type is not quite so enjoyable. But in my view, it's a strikingly important piece of information that you have about yourself when you're looking at Type, for yourself and also for those around you, and particularly for those people who you love. I was a parenting skills educator for 16 years when my children were somewhat younger. I've probably spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of parents and spoken to them about their children, and very frequently spoken to them about the relationship between the siblings, and it's always been fascinating. But I think that my most important qualification that I've got for running this seminar is the fact that I am a sibling. I come from a family of 5, so I have 4 delightful siblings, but you will hear more about them a little bit later on. So let me just hand over to my co-presenter, Elizabeth, who brings a marvelous dimension to this session as well. So Elizabeth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Sue. So I'm Elizabeth Dunn. Some of you may have met me before or seen me about the place in terms of Type. I am a leadership and transformation consultant. I'm also a transpersonal therapist, and I integrate Type into all of that work. I've also worked as a parenting educator like Sue, and I worked with children and families in London for 10 years before moving into consulting. And Sue said to me a little while ago, hey, would you like to do this sibling factor session with me? And I said, yes, I'd really love to. I am also one of 4 children, so I have some experience of being a sibling as well, and also that experience of working with families, which has just been extraordinary. Had I known then, when I started working with families, what I know now about Type, oh my goodness, what a difference it would have made. So I was working with the models that I had at the time, and this has added so much more to understanding those relationships. So that's kind of an introduction to me, but a little bit I want to say about today's session. So we have some time. We're thinking about siblings and family. And I don't know about you folks, but family, whilst it can be absolutely joyous and amazing and fun and crazy and all of those things, it can also bring up some tricky feelings as well. So thinking about this in a trauma-informed way, I really would invite you to be with yourself gently. And I would invite you to share in a way that you feel resourced to do today. So if something feels tricky, I give you full permission to go, do you know what? I'm just going to put that to one side. But what I do want to talk about or explore is this. I also give you full permission not to share at all. If you just like to listen and hear from your colleagues and friends on this call, I invite you to do that. And if there's anything that comes up that's tricky, please feel free to stay on the end and we can have a chat. We can arrange another time to have a chat about it. So you're not on your own with this stuff. We're just opening it out really gently, inviting you to explore it. I also know that some of us had very difficult experiences with families and siblings. And to that, I really honour you for coming today. And we're going to help to support you and look after you in that. I see you, Chris, with your hand up in the air. So thank you for joining us today. So with that, I'm going to hand back over to Sue. And you're going to take it away, my lovely, aren't you?
Yes, I certainly am. And I think just that lovely introduction from you is a great example of how ESTJs and ENFPs can work together. So thank you so much for taking all of those feeling preferences into account. That's really lovely. So just to sort of orientate ourselves a little bit, we'll just do a little bit on what do we mean by type. I'm unsure exactly where everybody is coming from. So type describes preferred ways of noticing, deciding, and relating. It's about patterns and tendencies. It's not about boxing people in. It's not about fixed limits. And no more. It can be no more important than in this area of understanding family and how we relate to each other as young people, and how that goes into our older adult selves. So it can help us understand differences without reducing people to labels.
Folks, there we go. I managed to put myself on mute. So, yeah, it's a gift. So type is just one lens, as I alluded to before. That shapes how we notice and respond and relate to things. It also shapes how our siblings notice and respond and relate to things. We're going to go on to talk about this in a moment. Sue's done a fabulous section on clicks and clashes, which I absolutely love. But it also doesn't replace thinking about role. I'm sure some of you have thought about birth order coming to the session today. What does it mean to be the oldest? I mean, I'm the oldest. I have feelings about that. I have thoughts about that as well, Sue. But, you know, that also comes into it. And also thinking about our history and culture and ideas about how siblings should be in relationship to each other, perhaps older and younger siblings and what roles they should play, and also our contexts and experiences. So depending on where and when we grew up in the world, that will really influence what our experiences have been and what we might bring to the session today. So I just want to open that out, and then we're going to take you on a gentle journey through type. So by hand, yeah. So it's been really interesting over the past few weeks talking to people about their experiences of siblings and how they grew up. And what's come over is even my idea of like growing up within a family. People have such different experiences. So many people have grown up with siblings in different parts of the world, or perhaps not known their siblings. So we've got all of this going on as well. But if you go on to the next slide, some of what we're talking about today is that. So how type comes into that, but also thinking about perhaps having grown up in a family with our siblings. Sometimes we might think, oh, same home, same family, same experience. Just give me a wave, folks, if you think that is not what happened to you. So do you think your siblings had a different experience to you? I'm not seeing any wild waving, but I'll do it for myself. I know my, thank you so much, Layla.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about some of that today. So we often experience our environment, shared environment differently, and type can be a big part of that. And also each child has different encounters with expectations and pressures and different relationships in the family. And what Sue and myself are presenting today is the idea that type can really help us to unpack that and understand it, and give us some insight and perhaps understanding as to why siblings may react differently to similar situations. And by recognizing the role of type in those dynamics, it can really give us a deeper appreciation of our own experience, but also the diversity of experiences within our family. And it allows us to see beyond that surface bit, or perhaps the squabbling, if you like, and move into what makes our journeys unique. And as part of this, I'm going to hand over to Sue, because both of us are going to share our kind of maps of our families of origin. So over to you, Sue, for your one.
Yeah, thank you. So this is my family of origin, 2 parents and 5 children. Uh, it doesn't take much type knowledge to look at these types and know what might have happened within our family. So I've got dad first there, ISTP, and mum, the INTJ on the right-hand side. There's color coding here. So the green are the boys, the green are the girls, and the yellow is the boys. So there's 4 daughters and 1 son. So I have 3 sisters and a brother. So the first 1, 2, and 3 are all INTPs, very delightful in their own way. And then I have my twin sister, who's the INFP. And then there was me. Now, the fact that there is someone leaping in the air isn't just because it's me. That is because I am the only extrovert in the entire family. So we have 7 people, all with all of them with an introverted preference, except for me. And so that played out in a wide variety of ways. I went out a lot. I needed to get away from the home just to get myself re-energized. I came back into the home. I would often walk into the house and go, whoo, I'm here. And I felt there was this sort of collective rolling of eyes. You know, it's like, oh, yeah, we know, we heard. So it was an unusual experience. And my mum really only about 10 years ago said to me, having an understanding now of the work that I've been doing, that I've been talking to her about, she only recently said to me, oh, Sue, that must have been quite difficult for you. And I have to say, yes, it was. Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time, but I certainly do realize it now. So such a lot of difference from me. Interestingly enough, my second sister believed that she was the odd one out in the family. So go figure. I don't know how she worked that one out, but she thought that she was the odd one out. But Elizabeth's family, as we will get to, is entirely different. Here you go.
So, folks, unlike Sue's family, we had a few more extroverts. And I loved Sue's version of someone jumping in the air, because if you were to be in my family when I was a child, that is pretty much what was going on, with one glorious exception. So where I put a question mark, it's where people haven't kind of identified their own type. So it's based on my observations of their behavior. And for one of my siblings, I just don't know. My 2 other siblings, so my younger sister and my youngest brother, when I said, hey, do you want to do this type thing? They were so enthusiastic. It was wonderful. I was surprised to discover that my second sibling was also an ENFP. I guess I hadn't recognized her and I saw her as slightly different to me, but there we go. And then my younger brother, an ESTP, I was saying this to Sue earlier, he can literally teach anything physical in the world. Driving instructions, surfing, paddleboarding, you name it. He can get people doing these things, and has this extraordinary sensing ability and ability to communicate and teach that to others. My dad, on the other hand, is a lot more reserved. And Sue says, while it doesn't follow absolutely, he was also an engineer and a businessman, folks. So I'm not saying there's a link. Sue says it's not necessarily a link, but I think he's also probably most likely an ISTJ and was a lot quieter than the rest of us. And believe it or not, folks, if you know me personally, you'll be surprised to hear this, but I am the quiet one amongst my siblings. So quite a different experience there from Sue. But similarly, I also used to go away for a little bit of quiet time. I need a lot of contact with other people. I absolutely love it. But I used to go away for a little bit of quiet, unlike Sue. So lovely. So what we're going to invite you to do is, in a similar way to how Sue and myself have just done, is we're going to put you into some breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, folks. We'd love you to introduce yourselves to each other. And then we'd love you to think about your own experience of being with your siblings or not, if you didn't have them, or if you had people who were like siblings around you, what that was like for you. And to have a think how type comes into that. So there's an opportunity to share, if you wish, with the people that are in your group. So, Lee, if we can send folks off for 10 minutes, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So I am really keen to hear what you all talked about. It is a fascinating topic, and I am just aching to hear what you all talked about. So perhaps you can share some of the things that you were chatting about in your group. So either just raise your hand or just unmute and go ahead. Let's hear what you had to say. What did you learn from that conversation, thinking about your own family? Did you have
really welcome to drop things into the chat as well if you wish.
I was with a young lady that's from Tokyo, but she spoke a little English and I don't speak any Japanese. So what we did talk was at least types and numbers, which kind of was interesting to make it this universal language. We could at least talk with letters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, Jean-Luc.
Yeah, I was quite prepared for this discussion because you may remember when there was the conference in Salt Lake City a couple of years ago. One of the day there was a seminar where we would draw the profile of our family. So I did the exercise already. But I remember I left the room, I was completely under shock. In the evening, when I was reflecting on my experience, I said, well, basically, you haven't discovered anything new. It's just that you have put the information you had in front of your eyes and accepted for once to look at it. But being the only intuitive and sensing family, all of my youth, I had the impression to be kind of someone with a problem that I felt not that I felt like I didn't feel like the others. I felt inferior to the others. So what I explain here in the discussion is that the oldest of my granddaughter, the other one is 2 years old, it's a bit young, but she's 7 years old. She knows the difference between thinking and feeling. And I'm starting with sensing and intuition. Now, given she's an ESTP, I haven't received a lot of interest from her for that, or maybe it's the style I'm using, but I think it's very important to explain that to the kids so that they understand that being different is just being different. That's it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, when you're a one and only in a family of any of those, on any of the Myers-Briggs scales, like me being the only extrovert, you being the only intuiting. My twin sister was the only person with a feeling preference. My dad was the only SP. My mum was the only NJ. Those sort of when you are the one out of a large group, it can feel very isolating. So yeah, thank you for that. Shirley.
Yeah, I've never done this exercise before, and I mean, as you were talking through your own families, I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Just looking at your families, and then I quickly did mine, or at least what I think mine potentially is. None of them have ever done the Myers-Briggs, and my parents are both dead now. But uh, just the insight of just imagining what they potentially could be and realizing that the dynamics of my family shifted enormously when my father died. My father died when I was 10, and everything seemed balanced for me before that happened. Everything was in balance, and I think because you know, there were two T's and the two extroverts, me and him. And when he died, the whole balance of the family shifted completely away from extroversion and thinking. He was also a perceiver, as far as I can imagine. So we were quite similar, and it shifted amazingly away to something completely different. And I became I no longer felt I belonged there at all, and I was just too much. And I needed scaling down on almost everything I did. And it's just, I've never actually really thought about it from a type lens before. I just like to say it would be amazing if we could have much longer session, even like a couple of days, because I know you're talking about trauma informed and so on. And I think this then impacts everything in your life in many ways. So there's I guess behind anyone's family, there's a really quite an interesting narrative. I would really recommend or even encourage you to perhaps think about running a completely separate 1, 2, 3 day session. I would be immediately signing up for that, because this is absolutely brilliant material that I think everyone who ever is a parent should engage in.
Yeah.
That's like Penny's work.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. I think it is an unusual perspective, because so often we talk about the parents and we don't talk about the siblings. So yeah, thank you for your insight in that. Tom, you've got your hand up.
Well, if I can just add, I think the impact of difficult experiences on our own type and on our families, it can be really profound. And also the whole family system can shift as people join and as people leave. So the arrival of another child or even a partner of a sibling can change the dynamics in your family, as indeed can losing parents or siblings as well, can really shift how the family works.
Yeah, and that's really true in my family. When before my father died, my brother and I were very close. He was my elder brother, just the two of us. And when my father died, we had nothing to do with each other anymore. And in fact, we've only just reconnected in the last 3 years since my mother died, which is absolutely crazy after all these decades. So yeah, it can have a massive impact and completely destructive one.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Tom,
Okay.
over to you. You had something to say.
Yes, I'm the oldest of 8 brothers.
Gosh.
No sisters, all born in 10 years. And I think I'm pretty sure my mom and dad were introverts. I worked with Angelina Bennett in our group of 2. So I think I might have 1 extroverted brother. I believe the rest of the 6 were introverts and likely engineering types. I thought my whole family, my mom's side, were very engineering style. I ended up in engineering school in college with big mistake. I should have gone to the liberal arts. I ended up in business. And but I was the brother who was always in charge of my brothers, my small brothers. My mom would say, take your brothers to the park and bring them home undamaged, which was just a terrible sentence for me. Being responsible. Who made you the boss? They would always say. And then I ended up running our family's business as well with the rest of my family in it. And they had the same question, who made you the boss? We had fights about direction of the company and all that for a long time. I outlasted most of them, but there were ongoing fights. So talking to my family over time, we would get together in family gatherings. We'd have conversations, and it was clear that my brothers had different experiences than I did. And I talked to my brother Mike, number 7. That's the main person I talk to now. We talk about those differences and recognize the families that were just different as each kid came into the group. And type played a part, and we were not aware of what that was until we did a Myers-Briggs in the business. I was interested in it. The rest of my family were not. So there we are.
It can happen all different sort of ways, can't it, Tom? And I love the comment that Lalia has put in the chat. No 2 children have the same parents, which comes from Gabriel Mate, who writes some excellent book. And I do really agree with that. I came across somebody with a whole different set of issues where he was an INTJ, and he was in a family of EPs, certainly, probably ENFPs, ESFPs. And he told me he felt like an eagle that had landed in the middle of a pod of dolphins, which I thought was rather a nice way of putting it. But we can sort of have these lovely metaphors about our family where we can just, be entertained by it, but also go, yeah, that was hard. Some of these differences are not very easy, are they?
Mm.
I think my brothers would say I was let's say, a penguin in the pond with a bunch of eagles.
Oh,
I was weird, the
fair
odd one
enough.
out.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there's a lot of comments there. And do you want to I need to pick out particularly, Elizabeth? There's
There was lovely comments about birth order and the difference that can make and how it can influence the parenting again that people experience. Barbara makes a really good point that a family's economic status over time, we all know this can change, and that can really put families under stress and pressure, which can change how people are parented and sibling relationships. And Barbara is pointing out that nobody ever questioned that she was in charge of the kids. I love that, Barbara. That's fantastic. Unquestioned leadership in the family. The next section that we want to move on to, thank you so much for sharing all of that, folks. And I appreciate there may be more thoughts, keep them coming in the chat. It's really wonderful to see people sharing ideas and experience and understanding. We were going to move on to looking at family roles. We started to think about some of that. Families quite often organize themselves around different roles, whether they're named or not. So Sue and myself had some quite interesting conversations about this. If you go back one, my lovely, that would be great. About the quiet one, the rebel, the smart one, the artist. And what I've done is I've taken a couple of examples of families that are probably quite well known, that we can kind of have a think about together. So if you want to move on to the next one, Sue. This is a rather famous film family. So this is the Von Trapp family from The Sound of Music. Did that come out in the late 60s, the early 70s, folks? Can somebody let me know? But this was kind of a wonderful example of families and how they work. So the Von Trapp family in particular were portrayed as really orderly and visible and very tightly held together. So you can see everyone's wearing the same clothes. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine says about 1964. 65, any advances on 65? And when I was thinking about this in preparation for today, I had to think about the captain. So their father had really strong, what we might think of TJ. So that organizing, expectation management of the family. Catherine's saying she's seen it 3 times. And this particular family in the story had a very difficult experience of losing their mum. And there is no doubt that this has influenced how the family operated. And sometimes, that control and organization can create safety and structure, which is really important for kids and families. But sometimes, that can be really good for children who need that and want that. But sometimes it can make it really tricky for kids who need a bit more spontaneity, a bit more playfulness or emotional expression. It can be hard to find room for themselves. Does that make sense, folks, how that links together? But in this particular family, you can kind of see who had what roles, whether it's, Liesel being the older or more responsible adult. Louisa and Kurt there in the middle quite often got stuck in that wanting to be playful and mischievous, but not having enough room to do that. And then at the younger end of the family, we have Brigitte, who was often quite quiet. We might think of her as an introvert, but quite often seeing quite clearly what was going on in the family. So coming back to that idea that, our families and the roles they put us in, the structure can be really helpful, but sometimes it can be a little bit tricky as well. So if we move on to the next family. Anyone who doesn't know them, this is the Adams family, possibly about the same time. Catherine, the original version, not quite the same as the Von Trapps. They have a very different a way of being and working together in expression. I know there's been more recent versions of Wednesday which have just been fabulous, but we might see her as being more introverted, less interested and motivated by that social smoothing bit. She's very happy with who she is and how she experiences the world and expressing that to people. But that's in contrast to perhaps her brother Pugsley, who's a lot more relaxed, easygoing, getting involved in things. Thank you so much. I'm loving this, Shirley. 1964 to 66 for the original Addams family. But what's really different in this family system is Morticia and Gomez, extraordinary couple, like couple goals, folks. They really validated difference and variation and diversity in their family. You can see it in this picture, you know, everyone's a unique, beautiful human being. They had very clear and strong roles, but it was supported in a very different way. So the Von Trapps, more orderly, restrained, quite a lot of sense of duty there. And the Addams family, much more expressive, theatrical, and that difference being openly embraced. So it's really lovely examples of thinking about how family roles can support us or perhaps encourage us to either go beyond our type, or they may encourage us in our type, or they may be a little bit kind of restrictive or something to rebel against. So moving on to the next slide, my lovely, thank you so much. So if we think about it, most families are neither Von Trapp nor Addams, but somewhere in between and having their own elements as well. It can really influence our own self-perception and how we interact with our siblings. So as I said before, it can really help us learn about ourselves, and even the restriction can help us understand what we are not. You know, if you have to rebel against something because it doesn't fit, lovely, thank you, Mark Jones putting in some comments there. So even if we have to rebel against something, that can help us understand who and what we are and how we want to be in the world. So most families have roles and ways of being. I think, Shirley, you were kind of saying, alluding to something around this as well. Families quite often have centers of gravity. So Mark is saying the Von Trapps were mostly sensing. Not sure. And the Addams family mostly intuitive. I think it's a real mixture of both. And of course, these are fictional families, so it can be, you know, about the way they were written as well. But if we move on to the next slide, Sue, what we'd like to invite you to do is to have a think about what roles were you offered, given? Which ones did you take up? What roles were your siblings given or offered, and how well did that fit or not your type, and what impact did it have on your type? And also, if you can, how has your understanding of yourself or your siblings shifted as an adult? So I know myself, my relationships with my siblings have changed quite a lot as we've grown up and moved out of the family home into our own lives. We can kind of relate to each other now more on our own terms. Those roles are still there, no doubt, folks, but it's more on our own terms, which I think we're all really enjoying. So what I'd invite you to do is to take a couple of moments to think or scribble or draw things out if you wish. And this is an opportunity for us to shift into thinking about some of those old stories that we might have told ourselves or each other, you know, and how it might be different for you. So we're going to give you another 10 minutes to go into the breakout rooms. So Leonel, it would be wonderful if you could do the same as you did before, not the same breakout rooms necessarily. I think all of us on these calls love meeting other people. So if you can pop pokes into groups to have a conversation about this. And same again, folks, only share what you feel comfortable. You don't need to share your whole family story. Small observations are more than enough. So I'll invite you to go into the group, and Sue and myself came up with this fabulous clue. So what were the family gatherings like when you were younger? And what are they like now? So sometimes that can give us a clue to what's going on.
Okay, I'm opening the rooms.
Thank you so much.
So
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
I'd love to hear from you. What were your takeouts from that? Chris, you've got your hand up.
Um, we had a pretty interesting group. We want to start off by talking about domestic and family violence and that impact on type, and the fact that the domestic and family violence came from the parents and affected the children, and then gave extreme trauma to children, and then how they develop in type is a critical issue. The other thing was that my father was a bully, and then all the other siblings took out that they took it up and or internalised it. Can I handball to Jonathan if he's here? Thank you to take this response further. Thank you.
Jonathan.
All right.
We were talking about how childhood trauma, especially, will repress a lot of what we understand about type, because it does not become something that you are dealing with preferences anymore. You're doing something for survivability, and you will naturally adapt to how you can survive the trauma itself. So your type will be very much displaced to a point where you may not even display who your core self is. And we also spoke a bit on neurodivergence. I deal a fair bit of neurodivergence as well. And what I found in type was that it will either accentuate or diminish any of the four functions. So when it comes to understanding type with trauma and neurodivergence, I have found that you have to look at it from a holistic perspective, as in the actual type itself, and not go through the four functions, because you will probably get it wrong. They will show a lot of varied differences there. But at the base of it, if you can cut through all of that noise, you will still see it quite clearly. So instead of talking about the roles, we went off tangents there, but I felt that it was something more natural and something more urgent that we did have to discuss and share about.
Yeah, I really want to acknowledge that, Jonathan. The impact of trauma and neurodivergence on type experience and expression is profound. And Sue and myself had a tricky time of deciding what we should focus on in this session, because there is so much that we could look at, but it may be that's something that we could come back to. It's really, really interesting, and something I'm particularly interested in as well. So thank you. And thank you for sharing, Chris. You're absolutely right. What I would say really gently is our experience and expression of type is mediated by the environments in which we find ourselves. And we will express what is safe and what is welcomed and encouraged. And we will learn, perhaps what isn't as safe to express. And I think this happens in all environments, wherever we are. And what I guess we would want for everyone is that they find themselves, they land in an environment that is delighted by their expression and experience of type, and supports and nurtures that. So I just want to say that, and however it is for the individual. So thank you so much for sharing, and I'd love to get into that some more, Jonathan. I'm really interested.
We have the other Jonathan, another.
Yeah, that was very confusing when Chris passed it on to Jonathan. I thought he was talking to you.
Yeah, two Jonathans. Yeah, we aim to confuse. What would you like to share?
When we were in the session, I remember there was a exercise I heard about, the Myers-Briggs Institute teaches, I think, is where you can figure out your family dynamic or the type of your family through the type code. So in my case, we're all introverts, so the first letter be I. Three of my parents and my sibling is my brother is sensors, so it would be an S. My brother, my mother, and me are feelers, so it'd be an F. And my parents and me are J's, so the family type would be ISFJ overall. And that was just the type of my mother, and I do think that's She's probably the strongest presence in the family. So I
Mm.
just thought I'd bring that up because the other people in my group were quite intrigued to hear about that exercise, the sort of
Yeah,
way you think about things.
yeah. And compared to how it might have been, ISFJ as a family type might have suited you in some ways rather well.
In some ways, yeah, but also I was thinking how other kids I was hearing were getting grounded and told, you're not allowed to go out with your friends and family or go out of the house. Whereas I was always by myself in my mind, quite comfortable, and my mum would say, "Get out, go out, have friends, play." So that was my equivalent of being grounded, being
Yeah,
told to go outside. So
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
ISFJ versus the
yeah,
INFJ.
yeah. There's no worse punishment than for an introvert to be told to go out.
Well, an introvert who's also an intuitive. That's the thing.
Of course, yeah. Olwen, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, it was actually to bounce off what we shared in our small group
Lovely.
between Chris, Jonathan, and myself. And I just saw a link between the question of trauma and that of neurodivergence. With all this leads me to adaptation, to the fact that there's so much adaptation, well, more or less adaptation, depending on sort of the fit there might be between a person and its environment. But I think in trauma, there must be a lot of adaptation.
Sure.
And neurodivergence also a lot. So sometimes that makes it hard. And even for people who haven't experienced those two situations, very hard to get to one's own true type. And sometimes it takes years. So I was saying we have to be patient sometimes. And I figured out my younger sister just 2 years ago, and she's 71. So
Sure.
let's be patient. Let's not rush.
Yeah.
And be patient.
Yeah. It is a lifelong journey, isn't it? And I think, Jonathan, as you were saying as well, Jonathan, number one, there is an underlying type. There is something that's there that was always you. And there's other things that come into play for survival some of the time, when you're dealing with trauma. You tend to want to, appease whoever it is that's causing the trauma and change yourself to adapt to make that situation okay. But there is still an underlying consistent type in my view. Anybody else? Is anything in the chat I wasn't looking, or does anybody else want to share something?
There's some more coming up about attachment, Sue, which I think is really interesting. And if anyone has seen any research on attachment styles, that's how parents might, children, wrong way around, children might attach to their parents. Bear with me, folks. I think also what's coming up for me, which is really interesting, is how parents and children attune to their siblings. So not just attachment, but also attunement. And our capacity to be with and relate to our siblings. And that can influence our ability to form good attachments, good enough attachments with people as well, secure attachments. And again, I think to come back to your point, Alwyn, that can change over a lifetime. So we can repair those attachments and have earned what we call secure attachments, which is indeed where we might settle back into ourselves and our relationship with ourselves and others. So I'd be really interested to hear more about that too.
Yeah, I'll have a look and see what there is on type and attachment. I haven't seen it recently, but we'll send it out to everybody should we find something that's really helpful. Any other comments before we move on? Were there any thoughts that you had on particular roles in the family that were linked to your type? My family was interesting in that I was the ESTJ, but the youngest. And so that EST nature took a while to come through because I wasn't given the space to have almost the leadership role that I craved. But it eventually came my way. Yeah. See, Jonathan, you're the family financial controller. As an ISTJ, I think you do that well. Yeah.
Well, I'm the third child in my family, and being an ENTP, I think that helped a lot in me being able to express whatever I wanted to do. That got me thinking that there might be certain roles that might just pull down the expressiveness of the type because of responsibility. Because growing up, I have total free hand to just, go mad, do whatever I want.
Yeah. I suspect that, it probably suited you quite well, David. The first two children were guinea pigs and you were sort of let to do what you wanted. But I don't think you became an ENTP because you were the third child and that you experienced that. And I suspect that was within you in the first place. I don't think, had you been born first, you probably wouldn't have still been an ISTJ or the chicken egg thing comes in there, doesn't it? Okay, we'll move on a little, but as I say, we're happy to keep chatting afterwards. So let me just share my screen again. So there's the click and clash. Sometimes we click with our siblings, sometimes we clash with our siblings, for sure. And clashing is inevitable. Often because you are competing for the available resources. And the resources can be multiple fold. It could be the love of your parents and your caregivers, or it could be for food, for toys, for time, for all sorts of things like that. You are pushing against each other to get that same available resource. And even in a healthy family system, the family is your laboratory. It's there for testing out your behavior and your emotions. We're not supposed to fall in love with our siblings, and nature sets us up not to. It's not what happens, but they do have a tendency to annoy us, even those we love. So given what we know about type, it's really not surprising that we can come to blows. And loving families, as well as dysfunctional families, all do. It's just part of life. So there are different ways of deciding, pacing, and communicating that can create friction. And I think in the type world, you see extroversion and introversion and judging and perceiving being particularly involved in the times when we find our siblings upsetting. And I think conflict often happens around that JP. I think almost everybody who's got a J in the family and a P in the family can give countless stories as to when it went well and when it went badly. And there's very likely to be more situations where it went badly than when it went well. Also, I think for me and my family, I'm the only E, I'm the only S, I'm the only J amongst my siblings. And all of these differences play out and continue to play out, but they're just not so problematic as they used to be. And for a start, thank heavens, we no longer live together. So this is really quite a bonus. But with my brother, who is the INTP, I realized that I had to be very careful about outwardly organizing at family events. I had to do it quietly. I had to go under the radar, but I couldn't not do it. As I've said before on an earlier session, type is not about what you can do. It's about what you can't stop doing. And despite the fact that I was the youngest, I had that ESTJ desire to have things sorted. There was nobody else in the family, certainly not in my siblings, who were going to do it. So I did play that role of organizer, fixer. And as the only extrovert, I was sort of the cheerer-upper of the whole family. I was the one that gave energy into the family, but it was quite tiring when you didn't get that energy back. So trying not to do it is not my natural state, but I know that my brother finds it quite controlling if I do it too overtly. So I have to be careful. And to be honest, he probably doesn't even notice what I've done. He just sort of thinks that things just get sorted by some miracle that he hasn't actually observed. With my twin sister, who I love dearly, I said to her recently, we both, we're in our 60s now, we're both married to men who are a little bit older than us. And I said to her recently, look, if it ends up that we're on our own, then, perhaps we could live together, in our older age, expecting her to say, whoopee-doo, wouldn't that be a fabulous idea? And instead, she looked at me rather quizzically and said, let me think about that. So I thought, oh, okay, my impression is very different to her impression. And I know that I'm a bit much for her. I think, as somebody else has said on this session already, but I'm aware of it thanks to type, and I take it into account. This idea of acceptable behavior to one sibling may be upsetting to another and may simply be a type difference. I was talking to a young woman recently, and she had ESFJ preferences, and her brother was an ESTP. He was younger. And she just spent, she's about 27 at this point, and she spent her entire childhood being kind of picked on and got at by her brother. And she finally decided, very recently, in fact, that she would stop this. And she thought, no, I'm actually not going to put up with this anymore. And she talked to him about it. And he said to her, oh, in a rather surprised way, I thought that was just the way we rolled. And she said, I really don't want to roll like that anymore. So that ESFJ, ESTP combination in that situation was one sibling thinking, I think it's kind of fine. And the other one going, it's really not. And I think an understanding of type accelerates the point at which we can actually turn to our sibling and just say, you know what, this is who I am, and this isn't quite working. And sometimes it can take into our not just 20s. I think actually that was rather good. I think 20s is rather young. Sometimes it takes us into our 50s, 60s, or as you mentioned, Owen, into your 70s sometimes.
Thank you so much. And of course, in our own sibling relationships, it's rarely as simple as click or clash. Very often it's both. And I'm sharing like a real world example here. So Serena and Venus are an incredible example of this. They competed against each other at the very highest levels of tennis. And at the same time, they achieved extraordinary things. So I think they've got something like 14 Grand Slam double titles between them and 3 Olympic double gold medals. So they've done extraordinarily well. And oftentimes they're also competing against each other, right? But this is not just a story about rivalry, if you like. They have mutually shaped and encouraged each other. So one sibling kind of opened the path for them into tennis, if you like, and the other kind of supported, differentiated, and she pushed even further. And both were changed by their relationship and their ability to work together. So I'm not trying to type either of them here, because as far as I know, we don't know what their types are, but they very definitely present in different ways in terms of style and presence. And sometimes differences in type can really be how we become more fully ourselves. So a little bit like those roles, sometimes they don't fit, and sometimes that's good for us. It helps us to become more of ourselves. And that takes us really nicely into, that ideal situation. The holy grail of type and siblings is where it doesn't create friction, but it can create complementarity. So shall I hand back to you, Sue, for that bit?
So shared preferences can bring ease and recognition. It's not an experience I have with my siblings. I'm so unlike all of them that is not something I have a story I can share. But certainly the different strengths can also create complementarity. And it has been my gift in life to have a twin sister who's my opposite as an INFP. And we were talking in the break just between ourselves and saying that actually a child with INFP preferences in a family system where nobody shares that preference, it can feel very isolated specifically. And I think it took me a while, certainly to get to my adulthood, to really realize how much we could be to each other if we really worked at it. And that's certainly something we've done over the years, and I appreciate it hugely. But similarity does not always mean harmony. And the work that's been done on type, particularly around conflict, suggests that it's that thinking, feeling difference that often causes the conflict. So the TJ, extroverted thinking, extroverted feeling, introverted thinking, introverted feeling, the TJs, TPs, FJs, FPs, they all have an input into how we deal with conflict. And I think that is a particularly relevant type preference and type difference when it comes to comes to the clicking and clashing.
So, my lovelies, thank you so much for your attention and for sharing with each other and for sharing with us in the group. We really, really appreciate it. And I've certainly learned a lot. Where we'd like to take it now is, having heard all of this, having reflected on this and perhaps your journey up to the webinar today, thinking about siblings and your relationships with them, we'd like you to invite to think about something, one thing, just one tiny little thing that you might do differently now. So we're curious to know, and we're going to invite you to share either in the chat or by taking yourself off mute. Sorry, putting your hand up probably. What are you going to take away from our session today? Sorry, Sue, if you could put it up again for me.
Sorry.
Is there one thing that you might do differently? Or there's one thing that you might take back to your sibling relationships now? And just acknowledging that sometimes we don't have the opportunity to do something differently with our siblings. So we may not be able to do it externally in the world, but we may be able to change our relationship to our siblings internally if they're not still with us. So what's one thing you're going to take away from today, or something you might understand or do differently going forward? So we're getting some questions about Serena and Venus's type. I'm not going to even get into that, folks. So what's one thing you might do differently, or perhaps something's changed, or an insight you've had from today's session? David, presumably that's with your children, being mindful of the family dynamics and how that can affect their development. Yes, indeed, being a parent. Shirley's going to listen more and stay open. Be curious and not judge based on past traumatic experiences. Tom Moran's going to invite his favourite brother to learn his type for richer conversations. Just tell you a story from one of my ex-partners. His grandmother used to go around and tell every child that they were her favourite grandchild. And I used to watch her doing that. I'm like, you can't tell all of them that they are your favourite grandchild. And she went, yes, I can. And off she went. Shirley's bringing that lovely idea of radical acceptance.
I love that.
Jonathan, you put your hand up, my lovely. Would you like to share? That's Jonathan Lee.
Yeah. I look at it from the point of view of both my children instead of my own sister. So my eldest son is an INTP and my youngest is an ENFP. And there's a 7-year gap between both of them. So you'd expect quite a lot of friction there, but they actually do get along well together when it comes to play, when it comes to exploring ideas. I think what I would do differently for both of them is to set firmer boundaries for each other, not as parents to children, but amongst brothers, just so they understand when and how not to take it too far. Because my eldest being a teenager now and being an introverted one at that, it can be quite tiresome having a bouncy brother just bounding into your room. It's like, hey, hello. Yeah. So I think setting boundaries for both of them would be something I would do a bit more firmly, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? One, Jonathan, I don't know if you've read any of Thomas More's work on the soul's code, but sometimes the experiences we have set us up for the lives we're going to lead. You know, the acorns leading to trees. So boundaries really, really important to help us, you know, navigate that for ourselves. But who knows where your introverted child will end up and what they might be doing.
We were talking ourselves in the break about a situation that I've certainly come across a lot in my parenting coaching situations, where you have one child that is particularly appealing in personality or just attractive and draws a crowd, which leaves the other child to feel somewhat less than, and trying to cope with the feelings of that other child who's not naturally effervescent and drawing the attention, is something that parents really do need to be careful of. And you know, it might be something that you have any one of you might have felt in your life, that you know, the other sibling just got all the attention. Sometimes because of that difference in extroversion and introversion. You know, as a society, we think that extroversion is what you need to be, what's more appealing. It certainly is not what I think. There's plenty of pitfalls to being an extrovert, let me tell you. But you know, we can take a long time to deal with a situation like that, even as we get into adulthood.
And this, I agree with you, Sue, as well as Elizabeth, because my eldest son is neurodivergent and my youngest is neurotypical. And a lot of times, you know, that's why, again, boundaries, I believe, comes in very strongly. Because a lot of times I find my neurotypical child behaving neurodivergent because he's just copying his brother.
Yeah. Interesting.
Is it innate or is it learned, Jonathan? We'll have to have another conversation about neurodivergence in families. It's probably a longer conversation to be had there.
We have the social laughter, so that's fine.
Yeah, we do. Did you want to bring in Shirley?
Yes, sure, Shirley. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick thought. You know, I was one of two. I was the younger. My elder brother is about 2 3/4 years older than me. I think 2 can be the trickiest of all. People seem to think 2 + 2 is the sort of the perfect dynamic or the perfect square. But I think in reality, there was a lot of compare and contrast in our family, which was to the detriment of both of us. So if I was the clever one, he was the stupid one. And so on. If he was the introvert, I was the extrovert, but you know, neither of those were then really valued and allowed to be what it was. The differences were not accepted and you know, actually leveraged. And you know, it was actually, my mother saw that she had to bring one down and bring one up to try and make us equal. She had this idea of treating everyone equal, which was absolutely catastrophic way of raising children who were completely different. An ENTP and an ISFP. Yeah, crazy. When I think about it, I have 4 of my own. And I think one of the real, I mean, I created my own tribe. And the lovely thing about having 4 children who are not even 6 years apart, eldest to youngest, is that there's room for everyone to be themselves and they are completely different. So ENFJ first, ISTJ second, ENFP off the planet third, and my little INTP, who's now probably 6'3" or something, you know, completely doing his own thing. The only person I know who could ride a horse staring at the sky. And you know, it's crazy that there was then enough space for everyone to sort of find their niche. Lots of competition, lots of groupings, and then regroupings as they got older. But never a compare and contrast. You know, you're the clever one, therefore you're the lazy one, or you know, that was just disastrous and really very, very damaging. And that's what I took into my own parenting, was never compare your children with one another. They are themselves. They have the right to be themselves and to be supported in that, irrespective of how similar or different they are to you. That can be a challenge in its own right, obviously. But yeah, so thank you very much indeed for this session. It's been very enlightening for me as a parent, but for me also as a child.
You're very welcome. Any other thoughts that anybody has as we go through? Tom, yes.
Sort of building on what Shirley was saying. And when I was in 8th grade, the rest of my brothers were all in the same school down to first or kindergarten. One afternoon on the way out, I was in homeroom. Sister Fabian was my homeroom teacher. All of my brothers appeared at my homeroom for some reason, not sure why. I said, "These are my brothers, Sister Fabian." She says to them, "Gosh, Tom is so great. If you guys were just like him, you'd be wonderful." I thought I would never live to get home.
Clear my preferences there, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting comment though, Tom, because sometimes, you know, you might think the person that needs the sort of the care and attention, how to deal with it, is the less attractive child, you know, but actually the child who does have all of those natural, you know, that natural charm, can charm the bird out of the tree, also needs to learn how to handle it. And it can't be they notice it, and sometimes it's really uncomfortable to be in that situation. With myself as with my twin sister ESTJ to INFP, people would openly criticize. They expected us to be the same because we were twins, and we really, really weren't. And lots of people would say openly, like, "Why isn't she talking?" Or words to that effect, and terribly damaging for my sister, which we've got through. But and I think also in my way, I also thought, don't get too far ahead. It's not a good idea to get too far ahead. So I think whatever I was doing, I would quietly try and do as best as I could, but I didn't want to get too far ahead of my sister. And it was a huge thing for us to then move to different schools when I was 11. I could finally just do what I wanted to do, and do it as fast or as whatever way I wanted to do it, and it didn't show her up in any way. She was a delightful, creative, spiritual INFP, and she still is, but very, very different to me.
Thank
I
you.
saw that in our family business as some of my brothers, 5 of my brothers left the family business, and they did really well on their own. Inside the family business, they were not doing that well.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we'll stop the recording, maybe? And then for those of you who want to keep going, we will stay and talk through anything that you'd like to talk through. It's a fascinating topic, and please keep thinking about it. And if you've got any questions you want to ask us, or particular situations you want to chat through, then I'm certainly very open to help you with that. So thank you for taking up your time on what is a Saturday afternoon in the UK, but really enjoyed you spending your time doing this. So keep thinking, and keep in touch. Just one more thing is that we do have a conference coming up in Oxford in September. It's got a most amazing lineup. We really hope that people will have a look at that and come along if you can. We're so impressed with our speakers for offering and donating their time, which means we can give you a fabulous number of sessions at such a good cost. So please do look into it, and come if you can. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. A conversation to continue, indeed.